Dear friends, I'm making this video from Havana, Cuba. The reason I'm sending a video isn't because I found it too difficult to match my schedule with your program, but because the company Zoom, upon which you are holding your event, essentially has banned Cuba from participating in the Zoom network. And since I am in Havana, Cuba, I cannot join you on Zoom. Now, I could have used other means, VPNs and so on, but I was not prepared to do so, partly because I think it's important for us to recognize the heinousness of US unilateral sanctions, the blockade against Cuba, the viciousness of US imperialism. Cuba is an island with 11 million people who in 1959 decided to journey on a path with great bravery, a difficult path for a poor country to establish socialism, only 100 and some kilometers off the coast of Florida, where there exists a country, the United States of America, which has viciously tried to undermine the Cuban Revolution, several hundred times attempting to assassinate the leader of that revolution, Fidel Castro, using its immense power, financial, military, its immense power to isolate Cuba, to destroy any attempt at revolution. And let me tell you, I'm not naive. It's difficult to build a revolution in a poor country. All revolutions, in fact, since the revolution against the Tsarist Empire in 1917 have taken place in poor countries. The pathway to build a future society out of the wretchedness of capitalism, the failures of capitalism, those pathways are difficult. They have been walked by the people in Vietnam, in China. They've been walked by the people in Cuba. They are experiments in trying to produce a different world. And of course, we recognize that since there are human beings trying to produce a different world, human beings will make all kinds of mistakes, all kinds of disasters. We are trying to build something other than the wretchedness of the capitalist system. Repeatedly, capitalism has had its turbulence, its complete collapse. In 2007, 2008, we saw the failure of the Western financial system, the capitalist system. Utter failure. The housing market collapsed in the United States. This brought down, in real time, the banking industry. And you see, it was as a consequence of the collapse of the Western capitalist system, the financial system, and so on. That system which prosecutes the illegal unilateral sanctions not only against Cuba but against Venezuela, Zimbabwe. About 30 countries out of 194 in the world experience unilateral illegal sanctions by the United States. That financial system collapsed in 2007, 2008. It was a consequence of that collapse, that utter collapse, and of the fact that the trade and development regime constructed after World War II, but accelerated after the debt crisis of the 1980s, that trade and development system was utterly unfair to the countries of the global south. It was because of both things: the long-term recognition of the failure of the trade and development model of the International Monetary Fund, Bretton Woods institutions, and so on, and the proximate failure of the world financial system anchored by the Western governments. Those two reasons pushed countries like India, Brazil, South Africa, and then later Russia and China into collaborating to produce different institutions. That was the genesis of the BRICS. It was always clear that the BRICS' possibility to advance a different kind of order, different trade and development system, merely a trade and development system, the possibilities of advancing something different was rooted in the fact that the class politics in these countries would have to be changed. They'd have to be transformed. In other words, if the oligarchy dominated in Brazil, Brazil would not be able to advance a new trade and development order precisely because Brazil then would be subordinate to the United States. Its oligarchy entirely subordinate to the United States. So under Michel Temer and Jair Bolsonaro, Brazil was not prepared to advance an alternative to the Western development and trade system. Yes, that's true. Although even then there were contradictions, even under Bolsonaro. This was the genesis of the BRICS. You see, I don't have any kind of essential critique of the BRICS. I don't believe that the BRICS essentially is good or bad. I believe the BRICS is only useful as a platform to advance, in a sense, an alternative trade and development system. It's only as good as the class politics of the countries that are members of BRICS. When there's a right-wing government in India, it is not available for a kind of transformative politics. But the potential of BRICS must be recognized. That's the first thing. Secondly, the BRICS are an instrument of a historical process that cannot be denied. The fact is that as a consequence of the powerful energy supplies of Russia and the powerful trade surpluses of China produced by the dynamism of the Chinese economy, as a consequence of that, China and Russia are accelerating the integration of Eurasia, drawing in even India, which has a great deal of problems with China, problems that are historical, go back to a border dispute and so on. Despite that, Japan, Australia, India, countries that are part of the so-called Asian NATO or the Quad, even they are drawn into the necessary integration of Europe and Eurasia, and to some extent Australia as well. This natural integration of Eurasia is precisely what the United States is trying to block or to delay with its pressure campaign against China regarding Taiwan and its pressure campaign against Russia regarding Ukraine. In my opinion, the United States is imposing a conflict on Eurasia against the natural integration of this enormous landmass. BRICS plays a small role in this. I don't see why people get so hung up in trying to overinterpret BRICS. BRICS is merely an instrument, and it's only going to be as good as the class politics in the countries that belong to the BRICS states. I'm speaking to you from Cuba, which is not a member of the BRICS. I spend most of my time these days in Latin America, in Chile, in Mexico, in Cuba, not members of BRICS. The mood in these countries is to seek an alternative to the US imperialist-led world order. BRICS is merely part of a long-term attempt to find a different pathway, a different kind of dispensation. History has afforded us the following lesson. We have left any age of certainty behind. We are in now an age of contradictions. We who are socialists must use every contradiction to advance the struggle for human liberation. If BRICS affords us a little bit of that contradiction, we advance through there. That's about it. Our goal is socialism. These are merely pathways, one way or the other, to advance those dreams. Thanks a lot.